Okay, where my nonprofits? Nonprofit does not mean that you do not generate money. What it means is that all of the funds for the business or for that nonprofit go back into the nonprofit. In other words, you don't necessarily say you report income because everything is going right back into making sure the nonprofit continues. So let's start with my church people. Just so you know, the queen bee, that's where she got her start, was with church. So if you are a minister, a pastor, you have a ministry and you are struggling and you're trying to get your finances together, trust me, you need to call the queen bee, because you cannot operate just because it's nonprofit, just because it's church, saying you operating on faith. That is not what faith means. Faith does not mean that, oh, I just don't take care of business. That's not what it means at all. The scripture says it is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. In other words, you are hoping to be successful, and you can't be successful in anything without money. Like I tell every leader, every church leader, every church member, people that think about church, people that criticize church, there is a spiritual side to church and there is a business side. There is no church that does not have to pay for their lights, their gas, for production. Everything that the church has that it operates off of, it costs them money. When I say that there's a spiritual side and a business side, I'm not saying it's a game or anything about that. Tithes and offering are biblical principles. It's just like with anything else. When you hear about donations and charitable donations, and the reason that the IRS says allows up to 10%, because guess what? That's what tithe is, a 10%. So it's not like they just came up with that on their own. That is literally what it means, and it is a biblical principle that they use in the world. So see why some of you are debating and walk around here playing, but yet you respect the worldly systems. That's being in the world, but that's being of the world. But you look at it and you say, okay, a charitable donation is different. That's where they got it from. It's from the Bible. So tithes and offering is how the church is supposed to operate. That's where you give, and that's you take care of the bills. And yes, the pastor should be paid. I don't know why some of you have a problem with that, but that's another video. However, when I say the church is a business side and a spiritual side, that means just because it's nonprofit and it's the church, you don't not count the money. You don't put the change up somewhere. You want to count everything. You want to make sure everything is deposited. You don't just hold the money until it becomes a certain amount. You want to make sure that you have systems in place. You want to make sure that you're taking care of the bills and that you're being financially responsible. The thing about it is that most of us do not have, especially in the black community, and I cannot emphasize that enough, because once again, that's something that we did not grow up with. We didn't grow up with talking about money and operating and having money. So having money and using it is different. And the same habits that we will take from our personal into our business are the same habits that we take into the church. So when people get confused and wonder how it happens, remember the same people that come into the seats of the church come from the streets. And from the seats, you go from the seats to becoming a minister if you're called or chosen. It is a stair. So you cannot expect people to be perfect. But what you can do is expect people to be honest and respectful the same way you are at some of these jobs. So when it comes to the church, the spiritual side and the business side, you got to take care of business. You got to know how much money is coming in. You got to be responsible for that money. You need to make sure that you're keeping account of, you're reconciling the bank statement. Churches are some of the biggest and the easiest places for fraud to occur. And if you're not watching over everything, you're setting the church up for failure. You got to make sure that there's security in the church so nobody is robbing the church. You know, we laugh about the movie first Sunday, but look at what, they were thinking about. Everybody knows the first Sunday is the largest Sunday, depending on how many members you have. Basically, you have to be a good steward over the money that's coming in, and it begins with having a great system. So for all my nonprofits out there, people that's like, oh, I want to give back and I want to start a nonprofit, there is a business side of everything and there's a spiritual side. A lot of people criticize Goodwill. I can't tell you how many people that say, oh, I'm not going to give my stuff to Goodwill. They turn around and sell it. Now, let me help you, because a lot of you, there's some of the same people that say that and talk about how things should be free, and you talk about grants. Let me explain grants to you. Goodwill operates off a lot of grants, but those grants require them to have in-kind donation or in-kind funds. In other words, they don't give them money without them having some money, because nobody wants to give a grant of $25,000, $50,000 into a place where they do not even generate or manage money. When you get a lot of money, it doesn't make you a steward or a great manager of it. It just means you have a lot. And whatever and however you manage that money, you will do the same thing with a little that you will do with a lot. So the reason Goodwill sells is because, number one, they've got to pay those employees. Most grants do not cover salaries. And anybody that tells you different, check it out. I promise you, you do not get paid for salaries. I've done grants for daycares, for churches. I've written 501c3s. I didn't just wake up yesterday and start doing it. Now, I could say different things so that I could get clickbait and I could rise real quick in my numbers, but I'm not a liar, and I'm going to tell you and be honest with you. What you see is what you get. The information I have is valid, and you can always verify it. And then the proof is in becoming one of my clients, my customers. The bottom line is that, yes, you got to take care of business, and you got to know how to do it. Churches, nonprofits, and you need a bookkeeper. You need somebody to make sure, because when you're in the fundraising business, you always want to have good financials, clean financials that can be reviewed so that you always remain trustworthy and give worthy. It's been your girl, the Queen Bee. Even if it's a nonprofit, baby, you got to do business better. Bye-bye.